G'day, I'm Eustace Black, author and all-round net fun guy. Welcome to the We Agnostics podcast. I may not believe in religion, but I believe in you.
Welcome to episode 3. These are some preliminary remarks for an agnostic, seeker, free thinker, non-theist or atheist or similar person embarking on a journey in AA. My great concern is that a dogmatic and rigid approach to recovery through AA will not suit everyone. Some people may feel that it is simply for the religious, therefore not open to them as people who are not religious. They may feel that it demands conformity now, in a way which was not demanded before, when we can quite clearly see from AA literature that conformity is not demanded. Suggestions are made and may or may not be followed. I don't have data to compare the whole of the history of AA to where it is now, but I do have the last 2 years of my experiences versus how AA described itself in its literature from 1939 onwards. Often there's a difference between what AA says about itself and what people within AA say, certainly what they purport to say that AA says about itself, and they are not always the same thing. So let's compare what AA says about itself compared to some of the things that I have heard over the last 2 years. So let's start with some selections from the Big Book and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, commonly known as the 12 and 12. Suggestions in the Big Book. Into action. Page 86. Yet, we believe we can make some definitive and valuable suggestion. Big Book, Working with Others. Page 94. He will be more likely to follow our suggestions. Big Book, Two Wives. Page 104. There is every evidence that women regain their health as readily as men if they try our suggestion. Big Book, Two Employers. Page 144. When the man is presented with this volume, it is best that no one tell him that he must abide by its suggestion. Big Book, Two Employers, page 145. If he speaks of his home situation, you can undoubtedly make helpful suggestions. Big Book, A Vision for You. Our hope is that when this chip of a book is launched on the world tide of alcoholism, defeated drinkers will seize upon it and to follow its suggestion. 12 and 12. Contents. Step 2, page 5. AA does not demand belief. 12 steps are only suggestions. 12 and 12. Step 2. Page 26. All of its 12 steps are but suggestions. Big Book, Into Action, page 87. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one priest, minister, or rabbi. 12 and 12. Tradition 9, page 173. But long ago, trustees and staff members alike found they could do no more than make suggestions, and very mild ones at that. Big Book, Two Wives, page 111. We know these suggestions are sometimes difficult to follow, but you will save many a heartbreak if you succeed in observing them. Big Book, Two Employers, page 143. To return to the subject matter of this book, it contains full suggestions by which the employee may solve his problem. 12 and 12. Tradition 9, page 173. This doesn't mean an AA won't take advice or suggestions from more experienced members, but he surely won't take orders. Big Book, Two Wives, note, page 104. Written in 1939, when there were few women in AA, this chapter assumes that the alcoholic in the home is likely to be the husband. Many of the suggestions given here may be adapted to help a person who lives with a woman alcoholic, whether she is still drinking or is recovering in AA. Big Book, Two Employers, page 140. If your decision is yes, whether the reason is humanitarian or business or both, then the following suggestions may be helpful. 12 and 12, Tradition 1, page 129. Our 12 steps to recovery are suggestions. The 12 traditions which guarantee AA's unity contain not a single don't. Big Book, Two Employers, page 148. We hope our suggestions will help you plug up this sometimes serious leak. To this, some people in AA may object and offer the following. They are suggestions in the same way that putting on a parachute is suggested when jumping out of a plane. The business of recovery for me is about getting well. That's about not putting yourself in danger, i.e. not jumping out of a plane. The metaphor simply doesn't work. I think it's very clear from those quotations that AA offers suggestions for recovery. It doesn't demand anything of the alcoholic. In fact, it goes to great lengths to remind us that alcoholics may not take suggestions well. So this really differs from my experience in AA in that the emphasis has been placed on various quotes within the Big Book which demand conformity to a certain way of doing things, including religiosity and prayer. Well, my first impressions were that AA was a religious program that would only probably work for religious people. And certainly some people within AA who are religious emphasize those religious entities. I was lucky to run into people early on who were not religious, who are out as atheists or agnostics within AA. This means I've come to regard AA as a quasi-religious institution, a Swiss Army knife, if you will, which can be used for any job that you may have at hand. AA has the tool that you need ready to go. So with that in mind, with AA being a quasi-religious organisation which makes suggestions about what alcoholics may do, let's have a look at the first step of the suggested steps. The steps appear on page 59 to 60 of the Big Book. The first of this is, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So for me, this was not an easy step. In fact, AA was not an easy culture in which to immerse myself. I found it very difficult and managed to navigate my way with the help of people who were atheists or agnostics and out in AA. And they reminded me that AA itself has changed over time, and the literature reflects that change from what we see now to what was written originally. For me, the first step is to recognize that I am powerless over my addiction to alcohol. That is not a choice. Rather, over a period of time, through taking thousands and thousands of drinks, hundreds of days of drunkenness, that my brain is now rewired. My brain no longer functions in the same way that a brain which had never had those experiences would function. Simply put, my brain has become powerless over alcohol and addiction, and therefore I am powerless as well. My life certainly had become unmanageable. There were many things that I simply could not do. Turn up for work, not drink, being the two huge ones. By the end of my drinking, I really had three things. I had a place to live, I had a job, a job that I still clung on to, but a job which really didn't want me there. And I had alcohol, and I used alcohol as a way of coping with the life that I had made for myself over a period of time. A lot of my drinking came down to drinking to cope with the consequences of drinking. A lot of it came down to coping with the consequences of never being able to develop a system of understanding and getting on with the world, which left me at peace with both the way of coping with being in the world and the world itself. When I was a child, there was a way of living and a dream of becoming a person which was very clear. I was clear about what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. That changed over time. Some people may talk about alcohol removing things or losing things as a result of their alcoholism. This is not the case for me. I need to recognize that I'm personally responsible for the things that I did while drinking, while I'm not necessarily responsible for my addiction. My addiction is a result of having my brain rewired, but I am responsible for the consequences of my actions. Those are the things which made my life unmanageable in the end, that I couldn't cope with drinking and I couldn't cope without drinking. So while I still had a clear vision of the person that I wanted to be in my head, the things that I did became increasingly separated from the person that I wanted to be. My life had become unmanageable because of that difference. Who I wanted to be and the things I wanted to do were constantly in conflict with the things which I was doing as a result of my addiction. During my time in addiction, I had built up a vast stock of actions and events which were in clear contradiction with the person that I wanted to be. So much so that had become a pattern of behaviour, and that pattern of behaviour was in conflict in extremis with the person that I wanted to be. It had become so that the person that I was, the behaviour that I manifested, the actions that I did, was starting to overwhelm the person that I wanted to be. They started to overwhelm the person as I saw myself, the best person that I could be. I'm not sure if you've ever said anything that you're surprised that you said. I thought that manifested itself out of your mouth before your brain had time to filter it. That's an experience I think that I had often. It's possible that many people have, but when your life becomes a series of events which eventually appear like a pattern of behavior which are in conflict with the person that you want to be, that becomes a very difficult place to be. Certainly some people have a difficulty with the concept of powerlessness, and I did as well. I don't believe that there is anything wrong with humanity. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with myself. I think that the religious model of telling us that there's something wrong with us and then selling us a cure for that problem is one which is fake. But certainly my behavior and the person that I wanted to be had taken different paths, so much so that they became a very painful internal conflict, and the gulf between the way I wanted to be, the person I wanted to be, and the person that I was becoming were not the same. They were in active conflict. The guilt and shame that I felt as a result of that conflict is what led me to often drink more. As I said, I often drank to get over the consequences of my drinking. And I'm not just talking about the physical ones. Mostly it was that splinter in my mind. So my drinking had become a threefold problem. I was drinking to cope with life, to cope with my inability to cope with life, and then to cope with my coping strategy for life. But mostly it had become a strategy to cope with the splinter between how I saw myself and the behavior that I manifested, what I did in essence. And by drinking, of course, I had decided, at least on some level, to throw away my life, literally, and the one life that I know that I have. I decided to throw away my humanity. I decided to throw away my compassion. I decided to throw away my love for others and even the capacity for love. I had decided to throw away my respect for others, but most importantly, I decided to throw away my respect for myself. So how did I get out of this situation? Well, the answer is simple and also not very simple. The first of all was to stop drinking. Most importantly was to ask for help. By asking for help, I admitted that I had a problem. By asking for help, I admitted that I needed others. By asking for help, I admitted that I couldn't do it by myself, that I couldn't repair that splinter between what I had done, the person that I wanted to be, and the things that I was doing. Certainly admissions of powerlessness over alcohol do not come easily. I do not like the idea of victimhood. I do not like the idea that I may not be in control of my own life. However, I have to admit that putting alcohol into my body is not a natural state of affairs. Once I did that, it changed the way my body worked, and it changed the way my brain worked. While I'm not personally powerless over my life, I'm not powerless over anything to do with my recovery, I am powerless over alcohol. It's something that I cannot ingest or even think about ingesting anymore. Of course, being a person who doesn't believe in the supernatural, I didn't think that there would be any great miracle in my life. From the first time I joined AA, I sought to understand how I was different from others. More importantly, I sought to understand why it is that I do what I do, why it is that alcohol has the effect that it has. It was through understanding and accepting that I don't understand the way my brain works that I came to be at peace with it. It was through accepting our best way of knowing things, our most reliable epistemology, could tell me why my brain was different from others, what I had done to my brain, and what I had to do in the future, that I came to be at peace with it. It was through accepting the available science on addiction, reading and understanding it, to the best of my ability, that I came to understand that I can no longer drink. Drinking is not an option. It will never be an option. That I have to commit to lifelong sobriety, and that the best option for me is to seek out people who are like myself, to listen to those people, to understand where they're coming from with dignity and humanity. Love and tolerance for those people was the key, without ever having any supernatural ideas about how things worked, now or in the future. For me, simply, there is no need for anything supernatural. So that brings us to the end of step one, by which stage I have considered to myself that I am an alcoholic, that I am powerless over the way my body works. But I have resolved at a very deep level to change the way I behave, change the things I do, and to bring the things that I do into closer alignment with the person that I want to be. Please note that everything in this episode, besides the quotes from the Big Book and the 12 on 12, are my own thoughts and ideas. They in no way substitute for anyone else's thoughts or ideas. They are offered only as a set of suggestions that you may use or reject as you wish. Thank you for listening to the We Agnostics podcast. Remember, stay sober, go to meetings, and take care of each other and yourself. For an agnostic, agnostic, seeker, non-theist, freethinker, skeptic. Oh, for fuck's sake.